Thank you and good morning. We just would like to welcome you to this training today. This is Grant Writing Toolkit, and it's going to be led by Dr. Jennifer Madden from Leverage Point Development. This is a six-part series, and we're on part two. The first training covered grant writing fundamentals. So we're really happy to be diving into a toolkit and learning some new resources and coming together to learn. So at this time, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Dr. Madden, and you're free to take it away.
Thank you so much. Welcome back. Yay. Last week I did the grant writing fundamentals, the emphasis on fun. I hope you all had a lot of fun and hopefully this week have a lot of questions. I had to tie my hands up to stop putting slides in the presentation, but I wanted to just make myself present less and hopefully engage you more or go into some additional discussions and explanations and thoughts and conversations. So I have a couple of things, and then I'm gonna invite you all to put your voices in the space, your experiences in the space. It helps all of us. All of us are smarter than one of us, and I'm here for it, fully here for it. So that's the plan. I've already set up the drive. I'm gonna send that to Shira. It'll have the presentation from last week along with the additional materials that I thought would be useful. I've already set up the drive for this week. I also have some really wonderful tools that I've popped into your toolkit that I think will be helpful and useful for you. And yeah, so I'm going to start with sharing my slides just for a little bit. And then I'm going to, I mean, you would be amazed at how few. I'm like, this is probably the fewest slides I've ever had in the presentation in my whole career. So I just want you to know that took a lot of effort here. But be clear, I got some slides if we need some more examples. And if you're not engaging, I'm going to just, go back, default to all of the wonderful resources that I have in such abundance. But let me get started with a screen share. And I'm so glad Angela is alert. She can tell me if I'm not sharing my screen again this week. Thank you, Angela. So I can't even say I was really testing you to see if you was paying attention because that would not be true. All right, now I'm going to share my slides and we're going to get started into the toolkit. Today, as Shira has said, is the second step on a six-part journey. Today, we're going to look at the grant writing toolkit, some really useful tools, some really useful discussions that we'll have around grant writing. And then I'll see you in October, hopefully around strategic planning, another fun, workshop. I love strategic planning, so come back. I didn't get a chance to last time because I was talking so much to do an introduction slide, but I want to give you a little bit about me. We talked about my research and why I'm so passionate about this work, but a little bit about me. Dr. Jennifer Madden, I am definitely the president of Leverage Point Development, a boutique consulting company. Boutique is fancy for just me, but I'm a very conservative entrepreneur, so I keep a day job. And in the day job, I'm the dean for the School of Business at Linfield University in Oregon. And as you can tell, I have a tremendous amount of school loan debt. So PhD from Case Western Reserve, the School of Business, and I have a master's in nonprofit management and bachelor's degrees in economics and American studies. So some other credentials I'm super excited about is a certified fraud examiner. I have that credential because in a business school, accounting and finance faculty think they're smarter than the management and marketing faculty. So I just got one of their credentials to just let them know that I could be an accountant if I wanted to. I just choose to be a management faculty. Sometimes you gotta, you know. Okay. I also have an ESCI certification because emotional intelligence is a superpower. And all of you have excellent emotional intelligence if you're working in the nonprofit sector. And so being able to tap into that is incredibly powerful and impactful. And I always love that I receive outstanding of the teacher of the year designations when we went into COVID and when we came out of COVID. And I just want you to know I take my teaching very seriously, and it is always my responsibility to make sure that you get the gifts. So again, ground rules for the class: always ask me a question, always give me a follow-up if you need additional explanation. If you're thinking a question, somebody else is probably thinking that question. This is safe space for you to ask anything that you want. I'm here for all of it. Yes. My gifts, I'm a design thinker, and that just means a person who has the ability to create something from nothing, a person who has the ability to see a future that doesn't yet exist. I would bet all of you are also design thinkers, just maybe never been called that, but you should consider yourself a design thinker. A strategist, I'm constantly making connections, thinking ahead, thinking backwards, thinking because we live in very complex and operate in very complex situations. So the ability to think linear is a luxury we can't afford. We have to be able to think from A to B, B to C, A to Q, because these are the communities that we're trying to support. This is the work that we're trying to do. We have to embrace complexity. I am a collaboration maker. I really believe that we are smarter together than we are individually, and being able to build and bolster collaborations can be very, very impactful in my work. And you've seen that in my research if you were on the session last week. I'm a solution finder, very solution oriented. We have a lot of problem identifiers in the world. We need solution finders, people who can be advocates for change and make things happen for the communities that they want to serve and support. And my gift is my ability to bring ideas to fruition. I'm also super proud to be author of a book on collaboration that I talked about last time. And just my little photo montage in the lower right hand corner. This is no top. We'll start in the top. This is Linfield, beautiful campus in the middle of wine country in Oregon. I've never been to Oregon before taking this job, so that's a whole nother story for a whole different time. And the next picture is my husband and I were in Italy. This is when I'm a doctoral student, and then I realized that my research is on to something really amazing. And sometimes you have to journey outside of your land to realize that you're such an asset to your community, and that's a powerful journey that happens for us all. And and the picture in the middle, my husband and I were in Egypt, and I've taken this hot air balloon ride that I swore I was not going to do, but was is probably the most amazing thing I've done ever. And so sometimes we have to say yes to things and again and enjoy that journey. And you have to ask me how I got to Egypt. It's my dad's fault how we got to Egypt. And now since we took him to Egypt, he thinks he's supposed to go everywhere with us. So that's me and my dad. We're in Lesotho. That's the country that South Africa completely surrounds. They modeled Wakanda after Lesotho. And so of course I tell my dad, don't ask me for anything else. I've taken you to Wakanda. What else can I give to you? Right. So this is me, and I want to know a little bit about you. So this is a double push, because in a lot of our grant proposals, we've moved from submitting these, wonderful, you know, multiple page proposals to now we have to submit words into, an online portal. They need to be X number of characters or so many number of words. So I'm going to put you to the test. Those of you who are engaged and able to engage, I want you to describe your organization in 7 words or less. Describe your organization in 7 words or less. It's going to take a few minutes maybe for you to think about this. But again, describe your organization in 7 words or less. Pop it in the chat, unmute yourself and try to do it. Do a quick draft on a sheet of paper, and then try to, put that information together. But we have got to get really good at telling the long story about our organizations and telling the short story about our organizations, because those are the skills that we're going to need in order to be impactful in this grant writing space. Okay, 7 words or less. All right, good. All right, some of us are good at this. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Hi, this is Cynthia from Nuevo Comienzo, and I would say youth development and education, community development, community outreach.
Okay. Good. Although that's good. Youth-based organization teaching emotional regulation, serving American Indian communities through arts and culture. Okay. Grassroots youth family serving under-resourced communities. Okay. Good. Excellent. Empowering youth through diverse, enriching experiences. Mm-hmm. Good. empowering youth through arts, athletics, and hip hop. Spot on. Yes. Fostering resilience and system impacted youth. Love that. Good. 50-year-old integrated behavioral health. Excellent. Okay, good. Okay, you guys are excellent at this. Good. Good. Okay, I love this. All right, good. You've encountered those so many characters, so many words. It's sometimes easier to write a longer proposal than the shorter one. So being able to get to the heart of the matter becomes incredibly important. So, all right, good. All right, excellent. Wonderful. All right, I'm going back to share my screen, and then I'm going to share my slides. I wanted to talk a little bit about this idea of grant writing. And just a reminder, I know you've seen it, that there are many names for the grant. It's the grant that we all are very familiar with. It's the NOFA, it's the RFQ, it's the RFP, it's the RFA, it's the FOA. And it doesn't matter what you call it. The critical piece is that you read the proposal guidelines very, very carefully. I know we think we want to jump into like answering the questions because that feels like what we should do, jump to the questions so that we can answer them. But there's so much good information in the proposal that you don't want to skip any of that. So when we're reviewing the proposal, we want to look for key phrases in those guidelines. Like, are there any musts? Because if it says must, that means we have to include that in our response in the proposal. Are there any recommendations or examples? Or do they say provide, 3 examples? And you got to make sure you have 3. Are there checklists in these proposal guidelines? Because if there are, you want to print that out and make sure you check everything off on that checklist to make sure nothing is missing. Are there any timelines so that you can be mindful of when you can start, when you must end, how long you need to do your activities for? Are there any limits in the amount that you can ask for? Are there limits to different categories that you can ask about? Are there any match requirements or reimbursement, guidelines so that you know how to plan for receiving the money? Do you need to spend the money before you get the grant dollars back? Do you need to have a 2-to-1 match or something like that so that you can be mindful of it? And again, your pro tip here is just mark up your proposal so you can identify any key areas that are helpful for you. I'm going to give you an example of a grant that quite honestly I write all the time, but every time I get it, I'm doing a relook at it just to make sure that I'm not missing anything different. So I'm gonna share screen just to give you a sense of what that looks like. So here's this HHS grant. I'm looking through it. I am highlighting things. I'm putting asterisks by things I want to make sure my eye goes back to. I'm identifying the pillars that I need to write under. I'm making a note that this equity in this grant is so important. I need to look at these cost principles identified in this legislation component. I get a sense of what the competition looked like. There's only 17 grants. It can only be for $800,000. It needs to be over 3 years if I'm going to write about construction, or 4, not construction, 4 years. And you can see I'm working through the proposal. I'm making note of important things. I'm making notes in this proposal. I'm studying it just so that I can be extremely thoughtful in my response. So I'm making note, lay out the benefits just like this, because this is how they want to receive the information. There's so many clues in the proposal guidelines, but sometimes we just jump to the questions and answer them instead of really walking through the proposal to collect those clues, So you collect this information and you make these notes. So as you go back through the information, you can make sure that your submission has these things. So here's a note. This must have these things. So I just need to be mindful of what is in here. How many jobs I need to correct based upon what amount. Again, this example was important because I only need to create the minimum number of jobs. It didn't matter. I won't score anymore if I created 40 jobs as opposed to the minimum 29 jobs. So things like that, the eligible activity. So again, I'm just saying, spend the time to walk through the proposal just so that you have a really clear understanding and good insight on what you need to be doing. So I'm going to stop share. All right. Good. Okay, I'm gonna just pause and see if there are any thoughts or questions or comments before I continue to move on. I'm committed to going slow in the toolkit workshops. Good, good. How many of you take the time really to do a thorough review of the proposal? You know, excellent. Excellent. Have you found that to be beneficial? How many people just jump to the questions and be like, yeah, I can get this. No. I mean, that's fair. I mean, I understand, but I'm just giving you some pro tips, you know. Good. Good. All right. Thoughts, comments? Wonderful. All right. I'm going to keep moving. Sharing my screen, and now I'm going to share my slides again. The other thing that I feel that is can be a challenge in the grant writing component is the budget. In the grant writing work, the budgets often feel like a heavy lift sometimes for organizations, but budgets are like amazing. And to continue to inspire yourself, just remind yourself, when you know your numbers, you know your business. And yes, I know everybody is running a nonprofit. It's still a nonprofit corporation. It's a nonprofit business. We still need to know our numbers. More importantly, because we are stewards of resources and our missions are so important. So understanding your numbers is incredibly helpful. And you probably know this, but I just love to put it in a little slide. Oftentimes when we're thinking about, when we're working on these grant submissions, the typical budget categories are personnel and non-personnel. Again, personnel is your salaries and wages. Fringe benefits. Sometimes there's a question on what that fringe means, and there's, mandated benefits and voluntary benefits. So mandated ones are like workers' comp, Social Security, FICA, things like that. Voluntary benefits are your medical, dental, life insurance, retirement, educational benefits. Those are clustered under fringe, but they're mandated and voluntary. Maybe you have your consultants or contracted services, and then your non-personnel, lease, rental, supplies, travel, things like that, right? So always the budget categories can be helpful. It's always good to remember that when you're thinking about your budget line items, they need to be allowable. They're within the budget. The funding, the funders willing to fund these items, they're eligible activities and costs. They need to be reasonable, and you need to be able to allocate them, appropriately. And again, the accounting systems that we use, we are able to segregate the funds properly, so that helps us in our work. And then the other piece, before I jump into an actual example of a budget, because I think that's really awesome to have in your toolkit, is just remember, when it comes to revenue and your ability to raise fundraising, corporate partnerships and sponsorships and events, they really help with revenue generating for nonprofits, and they include donated income. These are donations. Contributed income. These are grants and gifts. Earned income. This is like fee for service, and also in-kind contributions. Now, I know that in-kind contributions aren't included in your budget submissions, but it's still really important for you to understand what they are, because maybe you speak to them as a way to demonstrate the impact that your organization has in the community. So when it comes to your budget, you really want to understand the power of the budget, understand budget and actual. The budget is what you believe you're going to spend. The actual is what you've actually spent. Understanding the power of the budget and why you need the budget narrative. You have the budget because they just present the numbers, but the budget narrative explains the numbers. It's the why behind the numbers. You want to understand your cash expenses. Like, these are the things you need cash to pay. And then you need to understand your in-kind expenses. Well, if somebody donates space or donates supplies, those are wonderful expenses that you can get donated that you don't have to spend cash for. You need to understand your budget as well as how it connects to the larger fund development strategy, right? So the pro tip, if you love that budget, it's going to help you really understand the business. And we're going to walk through an example of a strategic budget, but I did see a question in the chat. So I'm going to pause for a second and see what that is. So Aldo, how do you budget a W-2 into pay? Is it in personal pay or admin? Okay, so the question about often comes up about the difference between a W-2 employee and a 1099. So a W-2 employee is your regular employee, and they receive the W-2, and it demonstrates what taxes have been taken out of their check, and it has all of this information that you provide to them, that they use that form, and they're able to do their own taxes. So this is your typical, full or part-time employee. The 1099 is your contract employee. And the 1099, the organization doesn't have to withhold taxes from the check, and they're just paid, whatever that contracted amount is. And so you would put both your W-2 employees and your 1099 contractors would both go in your budget. Maybe, and the difference would be your W-2 employees would go under your personnel costs, where you also have to calculate the fringe benefits, whereas your 1099 contract employees would just go in your contract line item because you don't have to pay the fringe on your 1099 employees. Okay. All right. And Aldo, does that answer the question? I want to make sure I answer the question you actually asked, not a question I had in my own mind, so let me know in the chat, or you can unmute yourself. Okay.
So no, what I was kind of asking for is like on the W-2, when you budget it in, is it budgeted in, like if I'm gonna pay the Social Security and all that for the employees, does it go into admin, or does that go into their pay and then we remove that from their pay, the extra part to pay
Okay.
for?
Yes, thank you. Okay. Aldo, if you're trying to calculate people's FICA and Social Security and workers' comp, I'm suggesting that it's much easier to hire a payroll company to do that work. And what you would do is have an understanding of what those percentages are. So let's take, for example, if FICA Social Security is roughly 7%, plus your fringe benefits is another, 4%. So fringe meaning like your vacation or retirement. And so your fringe package is about, let's say, 12% of the payroll. Then you just calculate that 12% so that you can budget for that fringe, and you let the payroll company keep track of the exact percentages of those, do your filings for you. It's a minimal cost, for your organization. If you're a small organization, many organizations use Paychex, many organizations use Gusto, but it's super helpful. It's a very heavy lift to try and run your payroll internally. Mm-hmm.
No, but I understand that because we
Okay.
use Gusto too, but
Oh, wonderful.
what I was saying is for like when you go for the grants tell you, you can have money for personnel, money for admin, money for direct, money for this. What category would that fall under for that?
Okay. Yes. Let me show you a budget. It would be under personnel and it would be under fringe, to answer your question very specifically. But let me show you it. It might be a more helpful way. So I'm going to, in the presentation, there was a link to a Google Drive, and I'm gonna walk through it, and then I'll drop the link into the chat as well. So I'm gonna share my screen and then walk you through what we have here. So I think seeing it might be at least a way we can have a conversation. So share screen here. Okay, so one of the tools I put in is the strategic budget. So I put some instructions in this notes page, so just save a copy and then you can play with it yourself, and you can play with the numbers, and it's a full kind of budget piece. So if you go to the first tab, it's just I put some examples of line items. And so I put also revenue. So it's not your typical budget. It's like a strategic budget, you know? So here's some examples of revenue and contributions. Here are examples of expenses. So for example, your question, Alda, was you put your W-2 employees here, you have your fringe benefits, and then they get calculated here. And then you might have this is where I would put my 1099 professional service contracted employees would be here, you know. And so you can also build out like what are some travel related or program related supplies and expenses. You know, if you use a fiscal agent, I put in a line for a fiscal agent fee, and you can get a sense of what your budget totals are. And then I also put in a space if you're receiving any in-kind contributions, you can also track that internally so that you can speak to that, even though in your budget they won't. It's typical that the funder won't ask for that, but you can speak to it as you describe how impactful or how collaborative your organization is. And so you have both your cash expenses and then your cash and in-kind. I also set up a place where you can put in like notes around your budget, and also a place where you can look at your current year actual to date. You can see what you budgeted. It calculates that for you. And then you can see you can add in what you're doing in the current year, budget to actual, and then in the previous year, because it just gives you a sense around what can happen. All right, so I am going to walk through the remainder of these pages, but I also want to pop the link in the chat. So, and then answer some questions. So the second page is the budget summary. So you can put the detail in here, and then it'll summarize everything for you here. So this might be something that you work with, that you would use in your grant submission. The simplified version is only the cash expectation, the cash requirements. You can change the date of your budget given when your budget year is, and it kind of pulls these things together. Now, the third piece that I'll talk about shortly is now understanding that I took these categories and then I created your development strategy. So all I did was that I took the high level categories, so personnel, professional, travel, and related, and I pulled these things together so that you can get an understanding of how much you need to try and raise. Because we think often that, I'm gonna submit these 2 grants and I'm gonna get what I need, but that's not always true. But if we think more strategically in a development strategy way, it can be very helpful for us. So what this budget does on this page is just telling us, I'm gonna zoom in a little bit. It's saying that, okay, here is my budget. I have the full detail, then I have the summary, and now it's compacted into these broad categories. And I have the totals, and it's calculating what percent of total the budget is for each of the categories. And then I'm thinking strategically, where can I raise this money for personnel, professional service, travel, programs, office, administrative, all of this stuff? Where can I raise those dollars? And I'm thinking strategically about where I'm going to raise those funds across these 4 typical categories: individual support, corporate support, foundation support, and special events. So these are grants and contributions and things like that, right? Fee for service under individual support or individual donations. And then you can see at the bottom is a calculation of where the majority of this support is coming from, okay? And then you can see where my fundraising targets are for each of these categories. And I'm going to walk through this again, but I'm going to walk through it fully. I'm going to give you the link, and then I'm going to pause and answer the questions. All right. And so what I like for you to think about then, if we're thinking strategically on how we raise the dollars to pull together the budget to do the work, then we have to look at each of these categories and really think strategically on what we need to do in order to raise those dollars. So for example, in the individual gift table, again, you enter your values in the green shaded areas. You can put your range. Like, do you think you can run a campaign where you're getting $5 contributions or up to $5,000 contributions? It could be 100,000. It could be whatever works for your organization. You get to put those numbers in. And it's just asking you, like, how many gifts do you think you can get at that dollar amount? And what this does is that it enables you to think strategically about how you're going about your fundraising. So, for example, we want to think strategically because if we know an individual donor who could afford to give us $2,500, we don't want to ask them for $25. We don't want to ask them for $250. We want to ask them for that $2,500. But if we're not being strategic, we might miss that opportunity. So we think about how many gifts we want to get at the gift range. The table will calculate for you. And then it just tells you that if you're trying to raise this targeted number of $8,500, you, based upon your numbers and the amounts, you need to get 67 gifts from individuals, from $5 to $2,500. Now, the thing that's important is that oftentimes this is where we land, here. But what we have to remember is that not everyone we ask is going to give. So we need to put this ratio, this multiplier in place. So that tells us with a 4-to-1 ratio, with this four multiplier, that we need to ask 268 people in order to get those 67 gifts. Let's look at it from the foundation side. We're submitting these grants. We've targeted like $192,000 in grants. So we're putting our grant range from $1,000 to $50,000. Again, you can put whatever range you want into this, and then we're looking at how many gifts we need to get in order to get to this $192,000. And we have this multiplier. We can make that 3. So if you put in 3, it'll tell you how many foundations or how many funders you need to identify so that you can submit proposals to. So if you want to get 12 gifts, maybe you need to write 36 grant applications, because not every person that you ask is going to give you a grant. And again, the same is just here for the corporate gifts, but it all ties together so that you can be very strategic about understanding your budget and knowing how it all comes together so that you can understand. Okay, I'm going to put the link into the chat so that you can take a look at the spreadsheet. Just do a file save as, save it wherever you want to, and toy around with it. You can enter the values in the green shaded areas. It'll automatically calculate for you. And I just wanted to give you something that I think would be useful for your toolkit to really help you get a handle on what sometimes feels overwhelming when we're doing our grant proposals when we get to the budget piece. All right, so now I'm going to pause and take questions. I know there were some in the chat and I see a hand. So I will, okay, Pierre, yes, let's hear you. You had the next question.
Thank you, Dr. Madden.
Yes.
Pierre Ariola here, Executive Director of Awoke.
Yes.
I was curious, and I believe there was one other person in the chat, Esmeralda Salcedo, who mentioned something similar about fringe benefit rates or percentages that you see on average for most grants. In the past, I've seen up to 25% of total payroll. What do you see? I think Esmeralda had put something around 14.5, 18, 20. So what's a safe percentage to put on a budget for fringe benefits? Both maybe strategically as well as a grant budget.
Honestly, I've seen 25% as well. And especially given what you're, again, when we go back to the fringe, it's both voluntary and non-voluntary. So it does depend on what are the non-voluntary benefits that your organization provides. Do you provide, healthcare, and what do those things cost you? I think most of us use some sort of payroll support, paychecks or gusto and they can tell you exactly. You can go to California and find out what the tax withholding is, and it'll give you a sense of what those look like as well. I just did a pull up of California's rate here, because California, as you know, is very expensive. And so you can see the tax withholding, you know, it might be even more. State is 6.6, Social Security, Medicare. So you can get these information straight from your payroll provider, and then you don't have, it doesn't have to be a guessing game. You can look at those numbers very specifically. You know what I'm making this up, your Kaiser plan is going to cost you, and then you can determine what percentage of that is, so that you can just use your percentage. At universities, it's like 35%, because the benefits are generous at universities, for example. So again, those percentages vary, but yes.
Thank you so much, Dr. Madden.
Good. Excellent. Esmeralda, again, I think that 18-20%, especially given that everyone's in California, and if you offer some, voluntary benefits, you need to account for those. We have to put things in the budget because they need to get paid for. We are far beyond those days where nonprofits don't understand and know what their numbers are. This is why the funders exist, so that they can support the needs of the sector. We need to be covering insurance benefits for our team members and ourselves. We need retirement benefits. Let's calculate them and let's put them in our budgets, Okay. Let's see. Yes, Kimmy, we're going to send you the slides. You'll get the recording and everything. Yes, Kathy, I put the link into the chat. Everybody should be able to access the link to the strategic budget and be able to just save a copy, and then you'll always have it. You can make a copy. You can make a bunch of copies and play with some things and keep some things. Good. Okay, I think we answered about the budget stuff. All right. Okay. Okay, good. Okay.
I believe Palvinder had mentioned that they can speak to this from a Elevate Youth California perspective.
Yeah, I know we're not gonna miss out on that. So yes.
Hi all. I can chime very briefly. I think I just want to echo what Dr. Madden said is it's important for organizations to know what their fringe benefit percentage is. There are some RFAs applications that explicitly have a limit. And so you'll have to be within that limit. And so wherever that is the case, you will have to be within that limit. But I will just emphasize the importance of knowing your organization's fringe benefit percentage for staff, or that FTE percentage. So full-time equivalency, typically that's how benefits are calculated, and then you would allocate it to your award. Specifically for EYC or awards that have you also submit actual financial reports as well as expenditure detailed listings. It's really important to be able to get that as close as possible, so that way you're able to budget out realistically what your fringe benefit is. For EYC, we're a little bit more flexible. Let's say if you had some changes with your benefits, we can make that modification through a budget mod. But I will say that that's not always the case. Some grants and awards, the budget you submit at the time that you are awarded is the budget that you have to keep consistent. Hence, emphasizing again Dr. Madden's point around it is really important to be able to calculate that for yourself and for your organization, and to be able to understand what that is, because if you might go with a smaller percentage thinking that you're more competitive. I will say for EYC, that's not something we look at. It's probably a greater question when salaries are low, as well as when fringe benefits are low. We want to be very mindful as, we're supporting staff in communities of color. Oftentimes those staff reflect those communities you're working with. And so we don't want to shortchange staff either. So on our end, actually, many of our reviewers will flag when there's high salary discrepancies for staff members. Senior or executive staff members are getting paid a lot of money where, community organizers, those folks who are doing work on the ground are not getting compensated with livable wages. That's often a thing that comes up by the reviewers on our end. So I'll just mention that in terms of salaries as well. But as best as possible, it's important to try to keep it as accurate and to be able to find that out. And I know Dr. Madden shared, ways to be able to figure that out. And then if not, for UIC at least, you're able to sort of get those percentages once you're submitting the detailed expenditure listings and financial reports. And that's a great basis to be able to apply for future funding, as well as, now you've calculated what that percentage is for fringe benefits, and you're able to include that in other awards as well.
Excellent. Thank you so much. That was just warmed our participants' hearts to hear from you. Okay. All right. I want to pop to, I think we answered the questions in the chat. Any other questions to be vocalized? Were there any questions about the strategic budget? I put a lot in that budget. I think it's going to be a very useful tool. I built it over the years. And but just know it's a lot in there. I'm having you think from a universal level about your organization. I'm having you really think through what are the details to these budget numbers. What, again, the budget and then the actual, because when you look at that, it helps you become a better planner for the subsequent year when you can look forward and look back. So those things are super helpful. Your ability to think about what you need cash for, and then your ability about tracking what you've received in-kind contributions for is super important. It's super important because if you really understand your in-kind contributions, you really can demonstrate how much more impactful or how much bigger your organization is because they're receiving these in-kind contributions. And yes, because we don't need the cash for those things, we often set it aside, but that stuff is super important, and you can articulate that in your narrative when you're submitting your grants. Pierre, I'm gonna take your question in.
Thank you, and I apologize for taking up so much space
No,
here.
no. If you have a question, others do. We love it. So
Awesome, thank you. I did drop it in the chat, but I just want to flag it. It's do
please.
you have any tips or formulas you use to identify full-time equivalent for staff for personnel costs?
Well, say more on this one. When you say
So really just trying to understand like what when we're doing grant applications, we're often asked what the full-time equivalency will be for certain personnel with regards to that staff member. Wondering if there's any tips and or formulas or calculations that you usually use with respect to figuring that part out, right? Because sometimes on one grant you're having them be 50%, and then in another grant it's 25 like 0.25 or what have you. And let's say you apply for 5 or 6 grants, there's only so much more FTE that you can put on that one individual. And so I'm constantly caught up in this place of like, okay, well, as a nonprofit, typically your plates get filled more and more, especially as you bring in more grant funds, right? And more programs. And so how do you balance that? What tips might you have with regards to that? Granted, I recognize part of it is like, okay, there might be a sign for you to hire more people at a certain point. But with like program directors with leadership that are often static in their placement and often take on more things, how do you compromise or navigate that in that space?
Thank you for the question. And I feel the pain in the question. So a very straightforward answer is really thinking about what the FTE is. So sometimes that question is different based upon who the funder is. So for example, it could be one kind of grant opportunity considers a FTE at 30 hours per week. That's a federal grant I just wrote, and they were like a full-time equivalent is 30 hours per week. So or it could be, like you said, you're really submitting for these 10 grants. So how much of a full-time position can I offer if I were to receive these 10 grants? Now, the answer is really you delivered it as you were explaining the challenge, in that, yes, it is smart to submit those multiple grants, and that makes a lot of sense. Most times, maybe you can, like I use in our kind of multiplier, for every one, for every four you apply for, maybe you get the one. So, but if you're in a such a sweet spot that you're getting all the things that you asked for, then it's really a preparation around expanding and growing your staff so that you can have more impact and do more work. And so there isn't a hard and fast rule on the FTE piece, especially when you're in the grant application process. But it does become a real challenge, as you know. I'm sure this is why you have the question, when you get those funds, and then how do you implement based upon, how many actual staff you have and how much programmatic dollars that you need to utilize. And what this does is that it tips another challenge, in that, oftentimes when we get those dollars, our ability to gear up to hire can often take longer than we anticipate. And so you anticipate getting these 2 grants, you get 4 grants. Now you need another half-time person. How do you go about, bringing that person in? And so it speaks to how much cross training are we able to do in our limited budgets? How much professional development are we doing on our team, so that when we get this opportunity, we're prepared for it? Because chance always favors the prepared. So it becomes, I believe that that's really like the piece that's a big challenge. So I think that you have to continue to move forward, thinking about how many people you need in order to deliver the work, and then budget for that need and figure out the actual FTE necessary to meet that need. And then thinking through, utilizing the time between applying for the grant, receiving the grant, applying for the grant, getting notice about receipt, and then receiving the dollars. How do you staff up to meet that additional need? Pierre, I hope that was helpful, even though it wasn't a direct response.
No, that's helpful. I think it's all about strategic planning with regards to the budget, and not thinking that you can do more with less. You have to do more with more.
Yes. I promise you that is the best. And let me say, it's not your fault. The sector, and I can say this because I have a nonprofit management degree. I've worked with the nonprofit sector for most of my career. They have sold us this idea that we have to do more with less, because we do have to. Yes, that's true. But here's the thing. I cannot tell you the number of organizations who apply for just for simplification, $100,000 in grant dollars, and then they only get $80,000. Now, what do you think this nonprofit does? They try to deliver a $100,000 program with $80,000. That is a recipe for disaster. But because we do mission work, it's tough to, how do we reduce services and only serve $80,000 worth when we know we got minimally $100,000 in need? So this is where we have to have this paradigm shift to abundance, and we have to be motivated and excited about submitting those grant proposals, about getting more dollars into the door. Like, it's not just the grant writer's job to write the grant, it's everybody's job to be good champions and good stewards of the organization, so that when it is time to write the grant, and a funder does hear about our organization, they're excited and want to be a part of that work, because it becomes very difficult in nonprofit organizations to do this. Again, instead of reducing services down to that $80,000, they still try to deliver $100,000 worth of services with an $80,000 budget, and that we have to stop that. Is that helpful?
Most definitely. Thank you. Thank you for making
Okay.
this not feel like we're losing our minds here, but we think that.
Oh no, no. This is real talk. It's beauty, and we just have to like get really good, and again, completely shift our mind to this abundance mindset. Yep. Any questions? And again, I think that that budget, it really gives you a grounding to say, you understand the big picture. Maybe you're just focused on this one program, but you understand the entire big picture. You understand the pie, you understand there are 10 slices in this pie, and you're going to try and get, 10 funders for each of the 10 slices so that you can get all that you need in order to serve the pie, you know? That's the important part. Because the mind is powerful, and we're gonna reframe this and be excited about that work. Understanding, our numbers so that we understand our organization, so that we are really good at getting the resources that we need to do this super impactful work, you know? All right. Other questions about? Yes, please.
I'm curious around the budget area where I sometimes find myself with funders is they want to fund sort of new things, right? And so I run into that a lot where I'm like, I'm just trying to like raise money for X amount of dollars. Like, you know what I mean? Like I need to pay my current staff and do my current programming. And it's great that funders want to help me expand, but I'm often like, if they give me $100,000 to do X, Y, and Z, maybe $20,000 of that is something I hadn't budgeted for or planned for. As a small nonprofit, you're really tight, but I could get, $80,000 of things I did. So how do you sort of balance that? It's almost a wash, right? Because now I'm actually spending outside of the budget I proposed for my board. And then the other complicating factor is like, if I'm going to do more work, I usually mean I need to have more staffing because we're so small. So then is it just that I hire contracted staff? Because I don't want to like hire a full-time employee for a grant that's going to last a year that may not be like, how do you just balance all of that? Or are you just transparent to tell someone this is only a possible year position? I don't know. It feels like a lot of onboarding and offboarding of staff for grant specific funded activities.
So, Rebecca, I want
Yeah.
to just say that you are spot on. This is real pain in the sector. Now, I have to tell you that the one powerful thing about the about 2020 was the pivot that funders tried to make, because I believe that that was more the case pre-2020 than post-2020. I believe that post-2020, funders saw that the organizations on the front lines were best positioned to have an impact in communities. And if we let them do their work, fund them in ways that weren't restrictive, that they could have an impact. This is the power and the shift that started to occur in 2020. And so you started to see more of these rapid response grants, more reasonable amounts of dollars, good chunks amount of money that organizations could operate with to have an impact and make change. You started to see funders starting to give multi-year grants so that organizations could like breathe for a minute, get the work done, and still think about strategically how they raise more dollars. So I just want to affirm that what you're articulating is exactly the challenge in the sector, and that this is the work that honestly for the future that we need to ready for. So it's true,
Because I've
how
talked to
do we?
funders who are like, here's what we do. And they're like, well, we don't want to fund things that you're already doing. And I'm like, well, like how are we going to continue to do them if you don't get funding?
And here, let me give you a direct answer to that. They're not your funder. Not everything isn't for everybody. There is a funder for you. That funder is not for you. That funder is only for your 20%. You need to find an 80% funder who cares about, who's inspired by the things that you do. Not all wealth doesn't understand what our missions are. We need to put in the work to understand how to best connect with the funder that understands our mission. Because when we don't, that's when we get mission creep. That's when we start to stretch ourselves incredibly thin. That's when we start to be underfunded, because I call it nonprofit anarchy. Like, this funder wants this. Well, let's be this. This funder wants that. Well, let's be that. We just have to be who we are and stay on mission, because we can only be distinctive in our areas of strength. And when we focus on those strengths and we find the funder who sees the power in those strengths, then we can get the resources that we need in order to do the work that we need to do in order to have an impact. And that's the most important piece. Get you some more funders. That's what I'm saying to the people who understand that 80% of who you are. Mr. Kelly, what you got? Go ahead. I
Hey,
see
John,
you
how
trying
you
to get.
doing? Good to see you. You always got this cheerful look, man. I tell you, I just love your smile. I just love your attitude. I tell you. Anyhow, down
Thank
here,
you.
turn up in Victorville. My question is, I think it had to do with in the budgeting is let's say you got X amount of dollars in one area for a particular area, and you run out of money in that area. Like, okay, let's just say you need to pull one money from one area that you're already funded for, and you want to pull it from another area
Yes.
that you're already funded for, but you don't need that money over there anymore. Can you use it for the other?
Yes.
So say like if you want,
So
go ahead.
I do. I understand you. Let me give you simplification. I think I might have used this last time. Maybe you got money in your budget for transportation.
Right.
Let's make the number simple. $1,000. Then you was like, I'm gonna need a whole bunch of paper. So I'm put $5,000 in my supply budget. But then you got an in-kind contribution from ABC Corporation that gave you all this free paper. And then you had a surplus in your supply budget. And then you like, we needed some more Uber drivers and Lyft certificates. So I need to put 4,000 of that supply money in my transportation budget so I can meet the needs of the community in a way that makes sense for them. Okay, two things. One, because you have both line items in your budget, it typically is simple to use one budget from one line item to bolster another. But you just want to check in with your program officer and just let them know, hey, we had this, it emerged that there's a significant need for transportation that we didn't anticipate. I already have the resources and supplies. I'm going to move those resources into our transportation line item. And this is especially true if you're working with, like, if you got a state grant or something like that, because they're very, like, any changes plus or minus 10%, they need to give an approval around. But sometimes you can make those changes because the agreement that you made with the funder, is in the budget. And this is the beautiful thing about the difference between budget and actual. Like, these are estimates, so your ability to move some things around slightly are allowed because what you negotiated for were the specific line items. But the most important piece is that you want to have communication with your funder. It helps you. Because you don't just want to reach out to the funder when there's a challenge. And this is a small thing. You want to take money you already have been granted and move it around a little bit. But what you're also taking the opportunity in this potential call or email is to say, hey, we're doing magical things with this investment that you made in our organization. We've learned, we've been successful, and we got someone else to contribute to this work, that you helped us to champion. And because of that, I see some more opportunity available in this transportation line item. So use that opportunity to get a request, but also plant a seed on how much impact that you're having in the work. You got me?
Gotcha. Like that impact.
Oh yeah, yes.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Good. All right. I got a couple more slides. Let's go back. Let's see if I'm gonna share my screen, and now I'm going to share my slides. Yeah, that's right. I do got a couple more slides in here. Okay. So, the thing that I also want to remind you is that, like, there's so much power in the work that we're doing, right? And if we think strategically, we can organize our grant writing so that we can create these efficiency. Maybe you organize your grants in like buckets. I know typically we just like, oh, we wrote this grant and then this grant and then this grant. I'm saying maybe we deconstruct the grants and instead create files that might say, okay, history. And then you can put what you put in the different grants under history, or maybe this is program, and you can deconstruct those grants and have your program file. There's lots of ways that you can organize the information so that you can create some efficiencies. Again, remember the multiplier, remember the ratio. If you want to get 6 grants, you might need to submit 24, but that's fine because you understand that, and it changes your mindset. When you have this abundance mindset, you're not overwhelmed with because you got to know. Don't take the no's personally. Learn from the yeses, learn from the no's. What was attractive about this program for this funder? So in Rebecca's example, that particular funder was probably attracted to the new program. So she knows when she's got something new, she wants to submit, go to that funder for it, And when people tell us no, see if we can understand. Sometimes when we submit grants, we get feedback. Sometimes we don't, but we can still get a sense for it. Maybe we decided we're going to jump to the questions instead of reviewing the proposal guidelines carefully. So that after action review might say, hey, next time I'm going to carefully review those proposals. I'm going to make sure I get the most recent, data and demographic information that helps me. I'm going to make sure I give them 3 examples because that's what they asked for. I just missed it because I was moving too quickly. Also know that no this year doesn't mean no forever. No is just people don't have the all the information that they need potentially. You want to move your no to no. Like you want to move that because maybe they need to get to know your organization more, get to better understand the mission of your organization and why your programming is so powerful. Maybe you didn't articulate that well enough using evidence and data, quantitative and qualitative information to tell the story on why your approach is so impactful. Maybe you didn't connect the lines as clearly. Maybe there was the jargon used. Again, take that no and use it to educate the funder. So when you come back, you can move to a different positioning, and also I think we forget this as well, but this is so important. We have to leverage our yeses. So I'm going to stop sharing. If we get a yes, if somebody funds us, we need to be running to get some more grants. Sometimes what we think we got a grant, we got a yes. Woo, I can relax for a second. I can breathe for a minute. I finally have some resources to give me. No, that is not the strategy. A yes is like, okay, somebody's backing this play. Now I need to leverage that and go tell, well, ABC Foundation supported us, so we winning. I know you want to get on a winning team as well. Leverage the yes. Leverage that someone's giving you an investment and let others know that their subsequent investment is already backing something that's been invested in. So you're mitigating the risk when you leverage the yes. So again, it's our fallback to have relief, but we want to really use that yes to catapult us to even more sort of grant writing. I think that's powerful. And so I'm going to share just a couple more slides. I'm sharing my screen, and now I'm going to share my slides. So the other thing that I put in your toolkit, there's lots of ways we can find resources, and sadly, these are tools that cost money. But I just did a quick search on Candid last time, and I put a group of California funders that fund youth programming. I just did a simple search on Candid, and let me share that into the chat. Hold on. All right, and I'm going to first share my screen and show you what I have put together for you. And so I just did hold on 1 second, make sure I'm on the right web page for you. Yes, now I am. Now I'm going to share my screen and show you what's in this folder. So I just did a search for youth funders in California, and it came up with, let's see, 476 or so. Oh, let's say more than 475 funders that are accepting applications. Now, I don't know anything about these funders, but like, we can't say it ain't no money in these streets. We just need to figure out how we go about looking for those resources. I'm going to pop the link in the chat, and so you can take a look. Maybe there's some familiarity. Maybe you just want to send like a, keep them up to speed about what's going on. Put them on your online newsletter, something, or just thinking about how you can tell your story well so that people are aware of the impact that you're having, and so that can be super helpful as well. Good. Okay, so I did get a question about mission creep. So this is this idea that does anybody want to speak to what mission creep is for them before I jump into a definition? Or anybody want to put their voice in the space to talk about mission creep? Maybe they've seen it or experienced it.
I asked the question, I heard it, I said, that sounds intriguing. I asked you, good doctor, if you would please elaborate. Thank you kindly.
I wasn't gonna put you out there, Ross. I was just asking if somebody had,
No problem. I need folks to know I don't know what a mission creep is. I want to make sure I don't have one or become one.
Dr. Madden.
Yes.
Marvin
Yes.
here. So mission creep, in my understanding of it, is where we move away from our mission statement, and oftentimes it happens because we're after the funding versus funding that helps our mission.
Exactly. It is, so let's just say, our focus is, let's go into some of these early examples, let's see, we'll redescribe our organization. So, for example, Rebecca Garcia organization empowers youth through arts, athletics, and hip hop. But what if she says, you know what? There's a grant from AARP that says they want to do intergenerational work. And so even though she's only focused on youth, she's halfway there on the intergenerational, and that maybe she could also serve seniors in this program. Okay, that's a little bit of mission creep if she's trying to do that work herself. But if instead she said, I'm going to collaborate with the senior center down the street, and we're going to go after these resources, and I'm going to have them as a subcontractor on this grant or a collaborative partner on the grant. They're going to bring the seniors, and I already got the youth, and so that makes sense. But if she's now trying to serve seniors after being in business solely focused on youth, that's mission creep.
Perfect. That was such a lovely example. That was really a beautiful example. So that answered all the following questions. So thank you so much.
You're welcome. Excellent. All right, good. Other questions or thoughts? All right. Let me go back to my screen, share my screen. Now I'm going to share my slides. Okay. Insurance also comes up often when organizations are thinking about this grant writing stuff. So what came up here was more discussion around fringe, where I really thought there would be more questions around insurance. Now, when it comes to insurance, organizations often need to get the liability insurance or professional liability, automobile liability, workers' comp for sure. Sometimes organizations will think about D&O insurance, directors and officers insurance. And this is the insurance for your board. And let me just say, it's not just you. When you think about insurance, we watch TV. We want to ask Flo what she could do for us. Flo is not giving us the best insurance rates. Any name we know offhand is probably not a good place to try and buy insurance. Allstate, anybody with a commercial, probably gonna be too expensive. Instead, go to the brokers, go to the marketplace. So I put two examples into the chat about about, getting some free quotes and estimates for the insurances that you need. And then you can decide if you want to put them in your budget for them so that you can get them. But again, going to the marketplace is a much better place to find insurance versus, calling Progressive and Allstate and State Farm and, Geico, so don't buy that story. All right. All right, T. All right. And so I'm going back to share my screen and my slides. I also want to go back to, this was the key components of the grant proposal, just to open up conversation, just to see, from last time, was there any additional questions on any of these kind of categories? I put numbers and letters if you were just like, okay, I want to know about, C, SMART objectives, or, 9 letters of support. Just wanted to just give you a chance to maybe go back to this notion of understanding the components of the grant proposal. And again, every proposal is different, but if we understand these areas, we really have a strong ability to submit, a proposal where we need to. So I just wanted to give you a chance to see if there was something in those particular areas or if there were additional questions, things of that nature. I've intentionally slowed down this seminar because, well, last week I was like, wow, I was really doing too much, yeah. So so I'm slowing down, giving us a chance to have some dialogue, for you to ask some questions, anything.
This is Kira. I don't really have any questions. I'm just absorbing the information because I haven't ever submitted a grant,
Okay.
So I'm just
It's coming. It's coming.
okay, good, great. So I'm just absorbing it. I just don't want it to seem like I'm not interacting as much because I'm really just absorbing everything. And you were preaching just a moment ago when you said, don't go to, commercial locations for a service because it is overpriced. It's definitely going into like more pocketed areas and finding, less known companies that you may find better information or better offers with. So thank you so much for the information.
No, absolutely. It's true. Even for my own business, I only teach the tools that I use. So that's why I was like, my insurance is from Hicks Cox. I was like, I never heard of this place, but the insurance is valid, so so no, I love that. Excellent.
I'm going to now try that because I have bundles right now with AAA, and I'm like, you know what? I want to try that now. Thank you.
You're welcome. That's awesome. All right. I did get a question about the needs statement, and so I want to go back to that because I think that I love that is a question, and I'm gonna remind you with this kind of quick slide share here. Share my screen, and I'm gonna go and share my slides. So again, the needs statement. This is number 3 of my top 10 things you need to know. Again, it relates to the purpose and goals of the organization. We use evidence to support the needs statement. Again, you want to make sure that you can achieve what you're stating that you can in the timeline outlined by the grant. And again, you want to always state your needs in terms of your clients or your constituents, not in terms of the organization. And so I'm going to share this part of the screen so I can zoom in. This is where I messed up last time. So I can understand needing a little refresher on this need statement. And so I gave a couple of examples. So this was for a Veterans Housing and Service Center proposal. This was a federal grant. And in it, I talk about, the goals and objectives and needs for assistance. And so as you can see that I talk about, the critical community and personal barriers, that's the language of the grant. And I talk about them being, clustered around high levels of unemployment, high poverty levels, low educational attainment, the limited success of micro enterprises, and the unmet needs of micro enterprises. And you can see, then I use this as sort of like my roadmap, and then I start to break it down just as I have said I would. So I talk about the context. So I contextually place the reader where I need them to be, and this is specific geography in the US because this is a federal grant, so they're getting grants from across the country. So I talk about Ohio, the 7th largest state, and it has 88 counties, and 80 of them are non-urban, and again, and eight of those counties make up 40% of the population. So I'm trying to build a story led by data and information about the need. So I'm saying that the county that I'm trying to raise dollars for, get a grant for, is the most populous in the state of Ohio, and the city of Cleveland is its largest city, representing a third of the population. So I'm using the data to tell the story for me. It's not me that's saying, oh, it's a lot of people that live in this city who need your help. I'm letting the data tell the story, and so poverty levels are substantial, keeping it this, and even before the recession, the poverty levels were high. And then I use the context to make the point. And so then I go in, just again, like I said, in this kind of roadmap paragraph, I said I was going to talk about high unemployment, and then I go into it. High unemployment, blah, 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 blah. And I go into the next page, and again, the context. So unemployment is 6.6% for the US, 6.5 for Ohio, 8.9 for the county, and more than double the national rate at 16% for the city of Cleveland. And then I reference the table. I talk about the data, and then I present the data. I just don't throw the table in there because I want to make sure I'm telling the story, or rather here, letting the data and information tell the story, and I'm presenting, the information from a very reputable source, the census data. The unemployment rate in the census tract, I even go deeper than the city because that's what the census data allows me to do, is a staggering 37.9%. I'm like, I have made the argument that it is rough where I'm trying to have an impact in, and then I use the data to provide the evidence for the storytelling. You see how powerful the needs statement, the needs section is starting to read when you allow the data to tell the story for you. Then the next thing in my sort of like roadmap paragraph, I'm talking about high poverty. Poverty is especially high in the city. These numbers far exceed national percentages, and it's high for children and African Americans. See table 2. Again, I'm showing that the context, to make it even more critical. And then I'm providing the information in the table format. So I hope that, wait. And then, and sometimes you don't always have all of that real estate to tell the need statement story. And so here it is done in a paragraph format. So let me share yes, okay. So here it is in a paragraph format. And so let me try and zoom out. I might have made this a little too big. Oh, okay, here we go. Hold on, I have to make it smaller outside of presentation mode, apparently. So, oh, I see what I did. Here we go. All right, now I can share back. Hold on. Share screen. All right, here we go. All right, let me go small. So here, the statement of need in paragraph format, for example, what issues are currently being faced by community members in the R3 zone? So this is the city of, Illinois. The Chicago area is in an R3 zone, for example. Describe how health, safety, and our economic well-being are currently threatened. So I talk about the data, again, telling the story. Imprisonment of women increased 700% since 1980s. Women are the fastest growing incarcerated population. Nationally, some 1.9 women leave jails and prison each year. I'm creating a sense of urgency utilizing the data. Nationally, 1.9 million women leave jails and prison. For Illinois, that number is about 36,000. Blah, 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 blah. Like the rest of the country, Illinois provides extremely limited resources for recently released women, as reentry efforts largely focus on men. Formal and informal barriers for accessing essential recovery and wraparound services, strategies for decarceration, family reunification, evidence-based and trauma-informed training mar the reintegration process. Now, you might ask why I picked those specific things to talk about. Because the organization that I'm writing the grant for has specialty in those areas. So I'm incorporating the urgency and what's needed in this need. And then I'm going to say, and look, here's an organization who's mission perfect for addressing these needs. So you can use the need statement to create the sense of urgency and set you up to win as you respond to why your organization is best situated for meeting these needs. So. Okay, I hope that was helpful. Ooh, time just go fast, right? Okay. Can you post a list of reasons? Yes. Angela, I'm gonna you will have the slides from last time and the slides from this time. All right, good. How do you best not knowing how much employer liability will be exactly? Julissa, if you could reframe that question, employer liability, could you say more on that one? Because I'm not exactly sure of the question there. If you're still on with us. And if this is an insurance question, then it's really you're just budgeting for your insurance as sort of like a line item maybe in your budget piece. Because maybe you don't know if you're going to get how much of a policy, but at least you'll have an estimate. And when it's in your budget, then you know what you can afford to buy when it comes to insurance. I think that's what the question is speaking to. Good. Okay. Any final questions in our last few minutes together before I turn it over to Shira? I hope that this was a much slower, get your questions answered versus the, fire hydrant lecture last time. Okay, Mrs. Kelly giving me the A-OK. Okay, I get some snaps from Angela and a heart from Miss Sutton. So, all right, I'm feeling good. All right, Shira, back to you. Yay.
Thank you, Dr. Madden. Always insightful. You're a great resource, and I really appreciate the questions that came in, and then also all of the engagement from you all today. In the chat, I shared the dates for the next training with Dr. Madden, so there will be kind of a break, but the next training will be on strategic planning fundamentals, and that will be Thursday, October 24th. And there will also be a strategic planning toolkit. So I really love how these trainings are set up. You get the information and then you get resources. And then later on this year, you will have an opportunity to connect with Dr. Madden in coaching sessions. So if your organization wants to meet one-on-one or if individuals want to meet one-on-one, we will have that available to you later on this year. Again, we want to thank you for participating and being a part of this training, and the materials and the recording will be posted to the EYC website soon.